We are at the 2018 Ripcord reunion, talking now with Terry Hodges of Lafayette, Louisiana. Interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Hey, Terry, begin with some background on yourself and where and when were you born?
I was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, January 1st, 1948.
Okay. Did you grow up in Baton Rouge or did you move around?
Spent my whole life in Baton Rouge up until the graduation from high school, and then I went to college at Hammond, Louisiana, at Southeastern Louisiana University.
Okay. Now, what did your family do for a living when you were a kid?
My mother was a executive secretary for the Department of Conservation for the state of Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up with three brothers, and we all grew up in our grandfather's house.
Okay.
My parents divorced when I was 6, and mother never remarried.
Okay. And then when did you graduate from high school?
1966.
Okay. And then where did you go after that?
Went to on a football scholarship to Southeastern.
Okay. And then how long did you stay there?
I was there 3 years, and that's where I was at when I was drafted.
Okay. Now, was it a 4-year school?
Oh, yes.
So you had another year left. So how is it that you came to be drafted?
I went there on a football scholarship,
Mm-hmm.
and always wanted a vehicle of my own. So after my junior year of spring training, I dropped out of school, went to work, worked the rest of that spring and that summer, and because I wanted an automobile for my senior year, and worked, made enough money, bought a car, used car, but my car, and was actually back at school. Football practice always started 2-a-days on August the 15th.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there for approximately a week practicing football and got a draft notice.
Okay. Now, what did you do once you got that notice?
Well, I had been drafted.
Okay.
So
Did you request an extension or anything, or did you just do what they told you?
I just did what I was supposed to do, I guess, is how I felt about it.
All right. So where did they send you for basic training?
I went through basic and advanced infantry training both at Fort Polk, Louisiana.
Okay. So relatively close to home anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, describe the basic training experience. What was that like?
Regimented. Getting up earlier than I was used to getting up. But it wasn't a bad experience. I mean, I was physically active all my life,
Mm-hmm.
so it wasn't any kind of physical problem or mental problem or anything like that. Just went through basic.
Okay. All right. How did the drill instructors treat you?
Okay, I still recall my drill instructor for our barracks was Sonny, we called him, but he was a really nice guy, fairly young fellow, but got along with him fine.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, in basic, I was one of the guys, and for whatever reasons, I was elevated to barracks leader, platoon leader, what have you.
Well, you were maybe a year or so older than a lot of the guys there?
Yes, I was, and I was somewhat more proficient in the athletics of it.
Yeah, I mean, football player, so yeah.
Yeah,
in good
but
shape.
see, I didn't realize that was not a good thing for me at the time. I should have been saying, hey, I love the tight,
Yeah.
and things like that.
I'm not
So I
sure
wasn't the brightest bulb on the tree at that point
Yeah,
in time.
but they kind of wanted a lot of infantrymen at that point, so I don't even know if that would have helped you.
I agree.
All right. Okay, so you get through that. I mean, and how long was the basic training?
I think it was 6 weeks, I believe is what basic was.
Usually 8, but they...
Okay,
but
8 weeks,
but
that's probably...
but not all that long on the whole. Okay.
No.
All right. And then you stay then, and then for your advanced training, is that infantry training?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and Fort Polk.
Okay. And how was the advanced training different from basic?
Well, weapons were involved. Becoming acquainted with the M16 and the 60 cal machine gun, going to firing ranges instead of just going on long walks, so to speak. But And of course, it was geared toward getting you prepared. Everyone knew that pretty much that we were going to be going to Vietnam, so that was the emphasis of it.
Yeah. Now, did they make any effort to teach you how to deal with the Vietnamese themselves? I mean, do they have a mock village or anything like that?
I don't recall that. No, I do not. Now, I do recall that we were introduced to a Vietnamese fella who was a sapper, as they called them, and he showed off his skills as far as stealth and what they were capable of doing and so on. I remember that. Other than that,
But nothing about the society or the people or...
oh no, there was nothing that I recall.
Okay.
It was primarily geared toward, you know, patriotism and being the best soldier you could, and so on.
Yeah, and just how to function as an infantryman in the field.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Be the best soldier you could, which would give you the best chance of being successful.
Okay. Now, were a lot of the instructors Vietnam veterans?
I believe they were. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, did you have any sense of who the guys you were training with, you know, where they were from or why they were there, or?
They were from all over. There was a large contingency from New York that were in my barracks. But there was a lot of people that were from Louisiana. Palled up with a guy from Port Allen, which is across the river from Baton Rouge, Ronnie Giesler. We became good friends. Also met a fellow named Browning, Robert Gwynn Browning, who was actually ended up in Vietnam with me. So that was, he was my bud, you know. So you make relationships and go through, but we were all kind of enjoyed all of the rappelling and firing weapons and so on.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. So at that point, you're still kind of playing soldier for the most part.
yeah, there was an ominous overtone always,
Yeah.
but well, there was a reality that was there that, but I mean, I grew up, I was a Boy Scout, had always spent time in the woods, so it wasn't that foreign to me. Some of these guys from New York, it was quite a bit of culture shock for them. But
Right. How much did you know about Vietnam at that point?
other than the fact that we're involved in a very bad, what I thought to be a very stupid war.
Okay. So you had an understanding that maybe the war wasn't such a good idea?
Oh, I knew for sure it wasn't a good idea. And I knew for sure that there were people that were getting killed or maimed that for what I thought were fairly political reasons. And I've always held that belief.
Okay.
But, and I always had the realization that once I had gotten drafted, that boy, I had really messed up. And actually my brother, one of my younger brothers ended up getting my car. So I did a lot of that for nothing, as it turned out.
All right. So you complete AIT, and that's probably the same length of time as the basic was? Is it like
Yes.
8 weeks or
Yeah,
whatever?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
All right. And then do you get orders for Vietnam, or do they go somewhere else first?
No, in typical Army fashion, there were, I don't know, 20-something guys, I think, in the entire company that had signed up to go to NCOC School at Fort Benning, Georgia, Shake and Bake School. And they took 13 or 14 of us that had not signed up and sent us. And I don't think any of the guys that actually signed up actually got orders to go. And we were somewhat apprised of what Shake and Bake School was all about and so on. And Ronnie Giesler from Plaquemine hadn't signed up as well, but he was sent also. So we were, of course, flying out of the same airport, going to Fort Benning to start Shake and Bake School. They flew us up. We would arrive there on base on a Friday, and and the school actually started on Monday. So once you got in and got settled in, they actually gave you a weekend pass. So we went into town and, of course, do what young men do. You know, in a town you're not familiar with, we hit every bar we could, and so on. And Ronnie and I both decided that we had no desire to go through NCOC school. So we reported back in, you know, Saturday evening, Sunday evening, and the first formation on Monday morning, Ronnie and I went up to the attic in the barracks and hid. And they had the formation. We could hear them. They were right outside in the company area. And they were looking, you know, where's Hodges, where's Geisler and everything. And we were just sitting up there saying, I ain't going to do this. I'm not going to do this. And so they ended up getting everybody, they were in for march, and they marched them off. They were going somewhere, you know, I don't know. But when they left the area, we came down into the barracks, went into the CO's office, and he said, well, y'all missed the first formation. You know, you're gonna be, it's not necessarily court-martial, but you're gonna be busted back to an E1. And he said, at E1, you can't go through the school. So we said, mission accomplished. That was great. You know, so, but then we got, shortly after that, we got orders for Vietnam, which is where we knew we were going to go anyway.
Right.
So
So
when we got to Vietnam, we were automatically made E3 again, because I don't think you could be in country without being at least a PFC.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that was a standard thing.
Yeah.
Why did you decide you didn't want to do the NCO training?
What my belief was that it was a very serious place, and I didn't think, from everything I had heard, that NCOC with shake and bake sergeants weren't that well thought of, didn't necessarily know exactly what to do, and I didn't want to be in that position. I felt like if I were going to tell men what to do, that I should go through it first, I guess. And I did not think that a pretend NCOC school would prepare me to do that.
Okay.
I just didn't. I didn't think it was right to show up over there and start telling men what to do when I wasn't apprised of what actually was happening. So that's the reason that Ronnie and I both decided not to go through it. We were the only two that didn't go that particular day. So
yeah. Of course, it was. I think you're the first people I've ever heard of who were sent to NCO school when they didn't actually sign up for it. So,
no, we did not sign.
So that wasn't a normal circumstance to be in.
We did not. We did not.
All right. Did you get to leave home before you went overseas?
A few days, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then how did they get you to Vietnam?
Flew to, what base was it? I don't really recall.
Did you go to Seattle or to San Francisco?
It could have been Fort Lewis.
Yeah, Fort Lewis, Washington.
Could have been Fort Lewis.
If you went up there, that's where you went.
And then went from there over to Cam Ranh Bay.
Okay. What's your first impression of Vietnam when you get there?
Hot. Hot. The day I arrived, went out on the steel tarmac, it was 114 degrees. And you could see the heat waves coming off the tarmac. So it was quite warm.
Even for a man from Louisiana, that was...
It was quite warm.
All right.
Yeah, it was hot.
Okay. What do they do with you once you get off the plane?
You got off the plane with your duffel. Well, you got issued your gear and stuff like that, and then they started calling people's names and assigned you to a company. I think I was in Cam Ranh for like 2 days. Got my orders to report to Delta Company, 1st of the 506.
Okay, and 101st Airborne Division.
101st Airborne, yes.
All right. And then how did you get up to join them?
Helicopter to the rear at Camp Evans. And then a day later, helicopter again out to Firebase Kathryn.
All right. And so when was this that you got out there?
Early June.
Okay.
It was early June.
Okay, so early June now of 1970. All right, and then when you join your company, what kind of reception do you get?
Uh, Cordial, nice. I mean, people were, they were helpful. Got my first squad leader was Randy Bink, who I thought the world of. Really nice guy, concerned about people, and got issued a bunch of gear, what have you. But and then you kind of get into the flow of things. The very first job I was given was to burn a bucket of shit. So that's the first thing I did on Kathryn was to mix flue gas in with a pile of shit and burn it. That was my first job. I guess they figure if you'll do that, you'll probably be responsive if they ask you to do something else. So.
Well, yeah, that you're the low guy in the totem pole, so you
Exactly.
get the ugly job.
Exactly, and you got to realize that.
Okay. Now, how long did you stay on Kathryn before you moved out?
We weren't there probably another 3 or 4 days, and we rucked up and was taken to the jungle.
Okay. Now, did you walk out, or did they fly you
No, they
someplace
flew us
else?
out. They flew us out.
Okay. Had you ridden in helicopters except for the trip up? Had
No.
You, okay. This is all new. And then that first trip out in the field, do you remember anything about that?
No, it was rather uneventful. It took me, when I first stood up with my full gear on, full sack, I remember I was thinking to myself, and I was in fairly good shape, and I said, man, there's no way I'm going to be able to walk around with this on my back. I mean, my legs were wobbling almost. But by the third day, I was humping with the best of them. So as a matter of fact, I was starting to, I walked point. And I walked point for most of my time over there.
Okay. Walking point is something a lot of people don't always want to do.
I wanted to watch after my own butt. I didn't want somebody else watching. Plus, there's an added benefit if you walk point, you don't have to carry as much ammunition. So there was an ulterior motive as
right.
well.
Okay. Now, you said you had, growing up, you had spent a lot of time in the woods and that kind of thing. Did that sort of help you at this point? Did you?
I was acclimated to the woods, to the not so much thick jungle, but I had always loved being in the woods. Became a life scout. Always hunted, and so on. So I was quite comfortable in the woods.
Okay. Now, at this point, sort of June 1970, were you encountering many enemy? Did you have much contact, or was
No.
it quiet?
No, nothing prior to that day. That was the first interaction with an enemy that I had.
Okay. So before that, and this is getting into the latter part of July when you're sent out to the Ripcord area and your company gets in trouble. So before that, basically, are you just patrolling in the jungle, and how long would you stay out? When they take you out, would you be out for a few days or a couple of weeks, or?
A few weeks.
Okay.
Well, it got to be the routine that we were out for 45 days or thereabouts, and then back in the rear for 7. There were a couple occasions during the monsoons where we stayed out much longer than 45 days because they just couldn't get to us. Everything was socked in.
Okay.
So.
And so when you're out there, what would be sort of a typical thing to do in a day? Were you usually in the jungle areas?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you have stayed someplace for the night. You get up in the morning. Now what happens?
You put the sack on, and they tell you which direction they want to go in that day, and you start matriculating that day.
All right. Now, would the company usually operate as a unit, or would you break down into platoons?
We would break down into platoons more often than not. The company didn't do anything that I recall as a single unit going in everybody went in the same direction, but we were we weren't one after the other for 125 men,
Yeah.
or something like that. So, which I guess tactically didn't make any sense.
Mhm.
So,
Okay. But I guess the other thing would be, are the platoons within contact of each other and able to support each other?
certainly, yeah.
Okay, all right. And so now, who was your company commander at that point?
Workman.
Okay, and how would you describe him?
I didn't have a whole lot of contact with him. You know, as far as captains go, I guess he was just fine.
Okay. Did you see more of your platoon leader?
Yeah, L.T. Thompson, I thought he was a great guy.
Mhm.
He was a great guy.
Okay. And about how large was your platoon?
Yeah, I don't really know. Really don't know. We had, 4 squads? Probably 10 men per squad, so thereabouts.
Okay. All right. So
Yes.
you were.
I didn't pay
Yeah,
attention
yeah.
to a lot of that.
Well, a lot of times, a lot of the units were pretty badly under strength. Now, maybe when you came in, did some other new guys come in with you?
Oh, yes, yes. I think as a result of the conflict in May,
Mm-hmm.
they were undermanned. So there was, yeah.
Okay. So you
Several
got a little bit
people.
larger group.
Brownie and I both were put in the same platoon.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Okay. All right. So initially, and so I guess then, so you'd advance, you'd go to wherever you're supposed to go to, and what would you do at night if you're out in the field?
you always set up an LP at night, and nobody enjoyed doing that, but you took your turn.
LP being a listening post?
Listening posts. Other than that, you spread around. If it were possible to dig a hole, you dug a hole. If not, then you just made do with what was available to you and tried to protect your position
Mm-hmm.
and hunker down and go to sleep.
Okay. When you first went out in the field, did you keep thinking there were bad guys out there, or did you hear things, or were you jumpier, or were you just...
I knew I was in a war.
Mhm.
I mean, I knew that there were people out there with bad intention. And you try and steel yourself to that, but I didn't give it a whole lot of thought. I just knew that it wasn't going to be pleasant. It was my job to take care of myself and everybody else that I could.
Mhm.
And if something were to happen, then it's time to man up and do your job.
Okay. Now, when you were moving through the jungle, would you go on trails, or would you make your own?
No, we tended to stay off the trails because they'll booby trap trails, and so we learned very well. I was taught very quickly that your best avenue through the jungle is to make your own way through the jungle, and which of course makes for very long days because it's thick and everything gets hung up, and it's hard and it's hot and it's humid. And it's pretty miserable, but that's what we did. So
Okay.
day in and day out, always trying to do my job as point man, looking where I was supposed to look.
Okay. And when you're point man, about how far would you be ahead from the next man behind you?
Not that far, but then if you're in triple canopy jungle, you're not going to be very far away from anybody. It's not like an open trail where if somebody's lagging back a little bit, you get a little space in there. Everybody's kind of trying to, and you're punching a hole,
Mm-hmm.
so if people can follow, but everybody gets hung up. So there may be spaces at times, but they always close it up. So I wouldn't say very far away
Okay.
at all.
All right. Now, what did you have rules, especially when you were camped, with like light discipline or noise discipline?
Oh, no, you didn't make any unnecessary noises. You know, that's
Would people
common sense,
Yeah.
I guess.
Would people smoke in the field?
Sure, they would, but you always cup your cigarette. You don't ever light a cigarette in the open. You know, you use common sense
Yep.
about that.
All right. And how much food would you carry, or water?
6 canteens, I think it was. maybe sometimes a little bit more. As much food as you could stuff in your sack. I remember getting, sometimes we had resupply with a whole case of food, and that was great. And you carried all of it. But then you were also responsible for carrying your own ammunition. Sometimes you had to carry extra 60 ammunition for the M60. So, you know, it was about an 85-pound sack on your back.
Okay. Now, what did you do with the sea ration cans or things like that, your garbage basically? Did you have to bury that, or did you take it with you, or just leave it?
We just left it.
Okay.
I mean, we weren't overly neat about that or anything. We did. I guess there were times when we buried it. I don't think it would stay buried. I think the critters, as soon as you'd leave, they'd go dig something up because they would smell it. But no, we didn't. We certainly didn't carry it with us. You're always trying to shed weight.
Okay. Now, did you have a Vietnamese scout with you?
I'm sorry?
Did you have a Kit Carson scout? Did you have a Vietnamese?
Yes, yes, I did. As a matter of fact, mine walked slack for me sometimes.
Okay. Now, some of those people were actual ex-NVA or Viet Cong and knew what they were doing, and others seemed to be staying out of the South Vietnamese Army. Was this guy actually good at his job?
He seemed to be. Seemed to be very conscientious.
If he's walking slack with you, that says something already, I guess.
Yeah, well, no, he was concerned about what he was doing. Always seemed to be doing his job. And then I told him, I said, if somebody ever shoots me and it's your fault, I'm going to shoot you. So that's.
Okay. So you spend about a month and a half or something like that out there, kind of patrolling around, or maybe, I guess, June and into July. And then while that's going on, the siege of Firebase Ripcord is getting more complicated, and the more and more NVA are concentrating around that. And then your company is sent in.
We were sent in from the rear, from Camp Evans.
Okay. And so, well, tell me about that expedition. You get the orders to go out. Now what happens?
We kind of knew that this was not going to be good. I had heard that actually our Captain Workman had volunteered us for this even after another company captain had declined to take his company in there. So we knew this wasn't, an ideal thing to do. So, and as in leaving the fire base, everybody was pretty tense about that. I think I was. I know I was. So.
Okay. Now, were the more experienced guys acting different too? Because you, the young guys, you hadn't really been in anything big yet, but the older guys would have been in firefights and things before. Did they seem to?
Well, I think it was probably the older guys that were telling me this is not going to be good. You need to really tighten up. So.
All right. Okay. So you head out there. Did you take fire as you went in, or?
Yes, we did. We did. They were firing on us as we were landing, all the birds. So, and of course, it's a known fact. If they're shooting at you when you're landing, they don't care if you know they're there or not, which is not the norm. Normally, if they're around, they don't want you to know. But if they let themselves be known like that, that's not a good situation.
Okay. And then do you recall where you had a string of helicopters come in to bring you in, if you're coming in on Hueys? Do you know where you were in the string or how far back?
I don't really recall that. Probably the third, fourth bird. I know that we were told that the birds would definitely not be sitting down. They would be getting you close to the ground, and when he yelled, you jumped. And that was a pretty good jump.
How high up do you think you were?
Probably 6-8 feet.
Okay. All right. You hit the ground, and now what do you do?
People were yelling, over here, move, move, move. So we moved in that direction.
Okay. And then that day, now, do you get into any other action, or do things quiet down after you land?
Things did sort of quiet down after that, and we were at landing zone, and we started moving down a finger in the mountain to set up. And it was not early in the day; it was more afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
So we started trying to set up a night position, which is the first thing that we did. Our platoon there, and. When you're setting up a position, of course, the first thing once you decide that, the powers that be decide we're setting up here, my squad went out from our perimeter to do a recon of the area. So we started going out so far, and I was up front, and I saw smoke off to my left. I didn't know if it was a spent shell or what, but we radioed in and said we were going to go make our turn now and go check this out. So we did. It was nothing. It was a spent shell.
Mm-hmm.
And we reconned all the way around the left side of our perimeter. And you came in to 180 degrees, and then we came back in the backside.
Mm-hmm.
The other squad, another squad, went out, and they were responsible to cover the right side.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether they just hadn't set up yet because they didn't know where we were setting up, whatever reason. The second squad out got hit. They got ambushed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when my good friend Brownie got hit a little bit. Patrick DeWolf got hit. Several guys got hit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when it all really broke open
Mm-hmm.
and started. It was bad, and we could hear them down there screaming. We didn't know what was going on, but so I, for whatever reason, I said, well, I got to go see if I can get to Brownie,
Mm-hmm.
get a little bit. So I got on my belly and started going down the finger, and a 60 caliber machine gun was firing over my head.
Mm-hmm.
Got a little too close, so I screamed back, get the fire up.
Mm-hmm.
You guys, from here to the camera, I had a 60 round hit, and I said, get it up. So, and they did, but I went down and going down, and I found Brownie, who was dead.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he had, I don't know what happened, but all of his stomach was gone.
Mm-hmm.
He was definitely dead. We had support, air support that day, and the jets were doing their ordnance down there, and they had knocked trees over. A tree had fallen on top of Brownie, and I could not get him out from underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't stand up. So I got his dog tags and his wallet and personal stuff.
Right.
And started to go down some more, and I heard a little bit again, and then I heard rapid fire, and that was that.
Mm-hmm.
So I made my way back up to our perimeter, and we ended up staying there that night. No, excuse me, we didn't. We moved our perimeter because we were getting chewed up.
Were you being hit with mortars or with small arms fire?
Small arms,
Mm-hmm.
our own grenades, at least we figured they were our own grenades. RPG.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we moved up past the LZ, up higher onto the finger of the mountain, and that's where we stayed the night.
Mm-hmm.
It got, for whatever reason, there wasn't that much going on that night. I mean, you didn't sleep or anything, but and right at very first light, it was dusk, and I remember I was, for whatever reason, I don't know, but I was cleaning my weapon. 'cause I was firing it the day before, and I said, well, you better clean it quick.
Mhm.
And I almost had it all the way back together, and we started hearing boop, boop. We knew mortars were coming in. So I slapped my gun together, and I recall a mortar round hitting in front of me that did not go off through gravel and dirt and everything on, on me. But I was on the ground anyway. But it didn't go off. But a lot of others did, and they knew exactly where we were. They knew they didn't miss a single shot. I don't think. Normally with mortars, you try and adjust. They were right on from the very first one. So we were up and getting off the mountain. And I remember seeing, of course, we were trying to pick up the guys that were wounded, hurt, or worse, and get them down to the LZ. And I remember, there were quite a few people that were very physically messed up. But we got down, and that's where we formed our perimeter again and fought through the day. I don't know about the other guys, but I found that they had trees there that had big wings that would come out for roots or whatever. And I found a hole in between the wings, and we had a lot of ordnance from people that were not going to use it. And I put claymore mines out in front of me, and I had ample supply of grenades, and if you wanted to come at me, you better be getting down, So, but we fought through the day, and of course we took casualties through the day, and they would attack at one side, attack at another side.
And when they're attacking, could you ever actually see them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How close were they getting to you?
30 yards, 40 yards, something like that, and you take them out. They seem to be a lot of them. So.
Okay. Now, were there at this time? Now, I think we're talking here. This is about July 21st, 22nd, because I think you were pulled out the day before they pull out of Ripcord itself, if my chronology is right. So it's about that.
We were pulled out that next day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that morning, later that afternoon, we were, as a matter of fact, a workman said, buddy up, when dark comes, try and slip out into the jungle, and they would have birds patrolling the area for the next few weeks trying to find you and pick you up.
So you were actually expecting to have to disperse into the jungle.
Yes.
Now, had there been, because there were efforts to bring in helicopters, and they were having some problems with that.
Yes, they were having large problems with that.
Okay. And what do you know or recall, or what did you see of that?
We were told, and it was late in the afternoon, we were told the Ghost Riders were coming in. And I have utmost respect for those guys, because they knew they were going to get chewed up. They were, the first birds in the previous day, they already had everything zeroed in. So they knew they were going to get chewed up, and they came in anyway. And first bird got out, was taking fire. Every one of them was taking fire. I ended up being on the third bird out, and then the next bird they shot down, and that's where, to my memory, that's where Captain Workman caught the prop, the blades, and was cut in half. But I was on the third bird out, and was
So you got out of there.
Entirely fortunate to.
All right. Now, was part of the company left behind and stuck there until the next day?
No.
Or did they all get out eventually?
I think they all got out.
Yeah.
They left bodies.
Yeah.
They left. I'm sure they left a lot of ordnance. But I think most everybody got down. But I think 3 or 4 helicopters were shot down.
Because there's a point where C&D companies of 2506 come out to help with the evacuation, and that I think was after you left.
Yeah, we were gone.
Yeah.
We were gone.
Okay. Now, through all of that, did you get hit?
No. No.
All right.
To my recollection, there were 13 or 14 of us that were not wounded.
And that was out of the whole company that,
That was out of the entire company, yes.
all right. So once you get back to Evans, now what happens to the company?
There was a colonel, general, somebody, some butthead, came in and told us that they didn't want us sitting around and dwelling on what had happened,
Mm-hmm.
and that they were going to send us right back out and they sent us back out to Firebase Kathryn.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started getting new guys in, in subsequent days. But we did not stay in the rear.
Okay. And do you think that wound up being a good thing for the company?
I don't know.
Well, how did the men react to all of that? Or-
I think they would have liked a little time just to be able to commensurate with each other,
Mhm.
to talk things out. And we did, somewhat on the Firebase, but that was, as far as firefights go, I was in several firefights, and that was by far and away the worst
Mhm.
day I would encounter during my tour of
Right.
duty over there.
Okay. Now, how long do you think you stayed on Kathryn before you went out in the field again?
I guess a week, maybe 2 weeks. I don't really recall,
Mhm.
tell you the truth. I know it took them probably a week or longer to get back into that area to get the bodies out.
Mm-hmm.
And Brownie's wife had requested that if he were killed, that I accompany the body,
Mm-hmm.
which I didn't know about. But we were off the Firebase, so it had to be a few weeks
Mhm.
that we were on Kathryn. And we were actually back out in the field, and we were actually involved in a firefight. Nothing like that day. But they sent a loach out, and I was up firing, and and so on, and they crawled up to me and said, "Hodges, that bird's for you." And I said, "Really?" he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, then I'm out of here. I'm gone. I'm going to wish you guys luck." But went and got on the bird, and never will forget. He went straight up in the air, 100 or so feet, and just buzzed the tree line all the way down. It was great. I was getting it, but he took me straight to Camp Eagle,
Mhm.
I think, where they took my weapon, ammo, all that type of thing. And then I got on I guess a C-130, went from there to Cam Ranh,
Mhm.
I think. And from Cam Ranh, and I still hadn't, we've been out in the field for almost 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I hadn't bathed or anything.
Mm-hmm.
From there, I went to Osaka, Japan. Brownie's body, turns out, was already back in the States, and they were trying to catch me up to the body, and actually put me on a commercial flight out of Osaka, not having bathed or anything in a few weeks. But I have to say the people on that plane they were marvelous. They were very, very, very kind people. Flew from there to the West Coast, and then from the West Coast all the way over to Dover, Delaware, which is where Browning's body was.
Right. Did you get a chance to change clothes or bathe or shave along the way anywhere?
Yeah, in California.
Okay.
In California, I did. Or it might have been not till Dover.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really remember.
Yeah.
I remember getting my patches and all that kind of stuff in Dover, so I'm not sure. But, and then took a truck ride. Brownie was from Georgia, and we took a truck with his body in the back from Dover, Delaware, into his hometown in Georgia for the funeral.
Okay. What was anything running through your head through all of this, or were you?
No, I was just bone tired.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was just really tired. I was really glad to be where I was. I
Mhm.
was not happy at all about why I was there.
Yeah.
thought it was all a total waste. I always thought everything there was a total waste of some very good men, but I've met some outstanding men there.
Had you ever met his wife?
No.
Okay. She
No.
just heard enough about you that.
I think Brownie and I talking one time, I think we kind of made this deal that if something happens to me, I'm going to ask your wife, and if something happens to you, you know, we kind of made that pact, but we were probably sitting around drinking beer and, you know, how that goes. But after that, my wife flew up to Georgia and met me, so I was able to spend a few days with her before I had to start matriculating back to Vietnam.
Okay. While you were in Vietnam, how much contact did you have with your wife?
Well, we were out 45 days, and then one night of the 7 days we were back, you would stand in line and wait for the Mars radio, and they would place a call, and you got to talk to her for 15 or 20 minutes, or 5 or 10 minutes, whatever it was. But that was the only contact we had, other than letters, you know.
Yeah. All right. So, but now you've got to go back to Vietnam, right?
Correct.
Okay. Was that just something you accepted you had to do, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So.
But my wife became pregnant then,
Okay.
so that's my only child. So my daughter came out of Brownie passing away.
All right. So now you head back out again. When you rejoin your unit, where are they?
They were back on Kathryn, I think.
Okay.
They might have been in the rear. I think they were in the rear. I think
Now, has the monsoon started yet, or was it still dry at that point?
It was still dry at that point. The monsoons were, well, I don't know. I think the monsoons had just started. I think they had.
They vary a little bit
Because it
depending
was
where you are.
very wet in the
Yeah.
mountains. So
Yeah.
I remember that I had a very hard time the first day getting up and down the mountains. I remember that. Waded through a little river. Remember falling face first. My legs weren't underneath me again at that point in time. But that didn't take long either. So.
Okay. Now, in these later months, was there much contact with the enemy, or were they largely gone?
We didn't have too much. We didn't have too much action after that. A little skirmish here and there, maybe a sniper, something like that, but nothing anywhere near. You know, the episode in June at Ripcord. So, no, it wasn't that bad. And then, not too long after that, I got my drop of 2 weeks and processed out.
All right. Now, while you were in Vietnam, let's see, did you ever spend any time in areas where there were civilians, or were you always
No.
out in the field someplace?
By the time I had gotten into the 101st Airborne Division, we had been banned from the city of Hue, which was the largest town, you know, a very large town in Vietnam as far as Vietnam goes. But no, they wouldn't allow us in the town anymore. So.
And there were not really civilians in the hill country where you were operating.
No, there weren't. It wasn't like the lowlands where you had farmers and so on. No, there.
Yeah.
Saw very few civilian people.
Did you see any of the South Vietnamese military?
No, not that I recall.
Yeah. So it was really just largely Americans, and you had your, Vietnamese scout or whatever.
Chuhoi Scout and up and down in the mountains constantly.
All right. Now, there are a variety of stereotypes about Vietnam and what happened there, and so I will ask about that just to see what you think of them. One of them has to do with drug use. I mean, was that something that you were aware of or saw any of?
Oh yeah, sure. When we were back in the rear, blacks got really involved with heroin. I would smoke pot. If it weren't illegal, I would smoke it again. honestly. But mostly just drank beer,
Mm-hmm.
alcohol, hard alcohol.
Now, when people were out in the field, did anybody smoke anything, or?
No,
Yeah.
absolutely not. That's a good way to get lit up.
Okay. And in terms of just sort of racial issues and so forth, I mean.
Well, I say no. I was talking to Dale Tower earlier, and there were cases where people were smoking out there. But
Yeah. It seems to happen occasionally.
I didn't. Huh?
It seems to have happened occasionally. It just.
Yeah. Obviously so. I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, and that's kind of what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and another issue has to do with race relations and things like that. And in the rear, did the blacks and whites kind of segregate themselves?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Blacks thought they were being entirely persecuted and fodder. Meanwhile, some very good white guys were getting killed, and I didn't see the distinction.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, in the field, if you had black and white soldiers out there together, did everybody work together?
Yes, yeah. And it actually, toward the end, it actually got to the point to where the black guys weren't actually going out into the field, which I didn't. I thought a large degree of that decision was because the most of them were starting to have drug problems. But I think it was also that the Army made a conscious decision. They reacted to pressure, political pressure, that the blacks were being disproportionately maimed and killed, so they allowed them to stay out of the field, which I wasn't really happy about.
Yeah, okay. Just asking, what you're saying.
Understatement,
Yeah.
I wasn't happy about it. Yeah.
All right. Now, did the Army make any effort to encourage you to stay in?
No, they did not. They did not.
Okay. In fact, you get an early out. Did they just offer that to you? Did you request it?
Nobody ever mentioned it to me. I got to Fort Lewis, Washington, and just processed out as everybody else did. Nobody ever came up and said, "Hey, we'd like for you to re-enlist," or anything, which would have been a large waste of their time, effort, and energy. But no, they never did approach me about that.
At that point, you had enough time in service. They were starting to let people out early on a fairly consistent basis. So I think a lot of other guys went out in a similar deal. If you'd been in long enough and you'd put your year in Vietnam, then
That was it.
Okay.
Yeah, I had put about a year in prior to that, so 11 months, 16 days over there, and they were more than happy to let me go home, and I was more than happy to go home.
okay. So what did you do once you got out?
I went back to school. Actually, when I got out, my daughter was only 7 days old. So, and of course, we resided in Baton Rouge. My football team, my head coach offered me my scholarship back. I had 1 year remaining, and also another year of being the student, the coach, not assistant coach, but to work with the program for another year.
Right.
And my wife said, you either go back to school there or you be a dad. So I stayed home and was a dad.
Okay. Did you find a job?
Yeah, I went to work for Mobile. Went to work for it was Southwestern Bell at the time, I guess. But installing telephones and climbing poles and doing that sort of thing.
Okay. Did you have any trouble readjusting to civilian life?
No, but that's not me. I kind of, just like I didn't have that much trouble going into the Army. That's where I am. I'm going to make the best of this, do the best I can, and I didn't fret over a whole lot.
And once you were back, I mean, would you talk to anybody about Vietnam?
No, I did not. Had no desire to do that. I didn't think they would understand. I I've got 3 brothers, never really discussed it with them. My marriage, fell apart, and I ended up going back to LSU and finished school.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of roll with the punches, I guess.
Okay. All right. And did you stay with Southwestern Bell, or did you go on to other things?
No, I went on to other things once I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I quit working for Bell when I went and I started the GI Bill to go back to school.
Yeah.
And had a part-time job.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
and one of my younger brothers and I shared an apartment.
Okay.
So that worked out.
So what kind of job did you wind up doing then after you finished?
I ended up in marketing, so I got a sales job with old Sperry Remington when they had actually dealerized about that point in time. And the fella that was given the state of Louisiana, I went to work for him in the Baton Rouge office.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually transferred to the New Orleans office and then back to the Baton Rouge office years, but I was 13 years with them.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right. Now, to kind of look back on things, how do you think your time in the service affected you, or what did you learn from it?
I already knew how to play with weapons, so I didn't learn that from them, I don't think. I enjoyed the bigger guns and the explosives. I enjoyed fooling with that. Didn't really learn a whole much as far as, you learn about things you don't want to know about. I learned about war.
Mm-hmm.
I learned about the human capacity for sacrifice against a lot of bad odds, to do what in your mind says you're supposed to do. People caring about people. It's probably the one thing that I've gathered from getting back with these guys just for the last 2 years, the last 2 reunions, is that they filled in a lot of pieces of what went on that bad day,
Mm-hmm.
but we also have a camaraderie that you're not going to find anywhere else. And we're also commensurate with the fact that there were some really, really good young men that were wasted.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel a loss about that. But then you also feel very fortunate to have reconnected with them.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're some great guys. They are just truly great guys.
Mm-hmm.
Feel about them more. I'm not one that has a lot of friends. Don't need a lot of friends, never wanted a lot of friends. I consider each and every one of them a true friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a few of them back home,
Yeah.
But that's who I pal with, that's who I play golf with. My circle's not that large, but it's a good circle.
Yeah, well, it is certainly a good group of men here. I'd just like to close out by just thanking you for taking the time to share the story today and help fill in another piece of it.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Jim.